maybe not yet, but in a couple of years, if you're financial, like responsible for the treasury of a company, you might have to explain specifically why you're not holding any Bitcoin in your cash reserves. Originally an economist, did also my PhD in economics, mainly on Bitcoin investor behavior. I think Bitcoin mining is one of the key players that could arise in grid balancing and make just an amazing market-based solution. Right now, governments might pay hundreds of millions per year to renewable energy providers to curtail, to shut down their energy production if there's too much energy in the grid. Instead of that, why not use Bitcoin miners to balance the load that is fluctuating due to rising renewable energy shares? Yeah, it's just the beginning of people thinking about putting reserves, Bitcoin reserves on balance sheets, etc. Yeah.
Before we get started, maybe quickly tell us who you are and why you're into Bitcoin.
Yeah, as you introduced me, I'm Jan Wüstenfeld. So I'm originally an economist, did also my PhD in economics, mainly on Bitcoin investor behavior. Finished that one last year around April. And since May, now I'm working for Melon Green Tech, Bitcoin mining company in Paris. So my main focus, what I'm mainly doing day to day, is looking at Bitcoin mining, but also, as my economics background, financial markets, political developments. So anything that is related to data and analytical stuff. That's what I'm looking at most of the time.
Really interesting.
Surrounding Bitcoin.
How was it when you are trained basically in the traditional economics sense to unlearn this and learn the new Bitcoin economy?
I mean, it's, as you said, you need to unlearn a lot. But when I studied economics, I've always been very skeptical on all the theories we were taught. So I was always questioning a bit the economic stuff we've been taught and the assumptions, etc. So I didn't knew it back then because I didn't look at like also in economics, etc. But I think that helped me very much in learning about Bitcoin and also being open to throwing basically the economic world upside down that I've been taught in university. And but yeah, you're right. Generally, I think that's also why many economists maybe nowadays still don't get Bitcoin or just see it as a financial asset or something. I mean, it's coming that economists are starting to see it as an interesting asset to look at, but more because it's gaining more and more financial relevance in the world. But it's, I would say, still not so much looked at as something that could turn our economic thinking upside down. So it's more like a financial asset. And
yeah, it's super interesting. I'm also curious when the shift comes from people having to explain why they're into Bitcoin and all the things, and rather have to explain, let's say you are a CFO of a company. Now, if you want to adopt Bitcoin on the balance sheet, you really have to do a lot of explaining why this is a good strategy. And I think there will be a certain point where you could ask as a CFO, if you don't have, when you don't have a Bitcoin strategy, why you don't have a Bitcoin strategy, like why there's no Bitcoin on the balance sheet. I'm really curious when this whole traditional financial space kind of gets Bitcoin so good that it's obvious, and the people that don't get it have to explain themselves, and not the people that get it have to explain themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now we're starting to see that more and more. I mean, we get more and more Bitcoin treasury companies, but they're all coming more from, I would say, still from the Bitcoin space. So Bitcoin is then turn companies into Bitcoin companies. But I mean, absolutely, at some point, any company that is holding a lot of cash reserves needs to justify why they're not holding Bitcoin. I think we're slowly getting to that point. Maybe not yet, but in a couple of years, if you're a financial, like responsible for the treasury of a company, you might have to explain specifically why you're not holding any Bitcoin in your cash reserves when you have a lot of, US dollar reserves, etc. in your treasury. So it's going to be interesting to see over time how that evolves. And I think inevitably will become a more and more important topic over time.
How do you look at the past, basically 1-2 years that happened with the ETFs, with the strategic Bitcoin reserve, with all the, it seems like very rapid pace adoption of Bitcoin as an asset?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it might seem, I mean, we're still just around 94,000 US dollars, right? So people would have said we should be at 500,000, 1 million maybe. So from that perspective, maybe you might say, okay, it's kind of a disappointing development, but I mean, sometimes we just overestimate how fast all these financial institutions are moving forward, how fast companies make decisions. And I think it's quite remarkable. On the one hand, I mean, the ETFs, they have been tremendous success, but also like more and more big institutional investors are starting to consider Bitcoin. If they're not already in Bitcoin, at least they now have to talk about in like banks, financial companies. They're starting to at least talk about Bitcoin. And I guess even if they're not into it right now, it just takes time for some of those bigger institutions and companies to at some point decide, okay, no, we are going to jump into Bitcoin. And I mean, it involves a lot more than what we do. We can just say, okay, let's set up an account somewhere. We smash buy Bitcoin. We don't have to think about managing risks for like other investors because we're just our own investors. We don't have to justify our safety system, etc., how we store Bitcoin, and all that takes a lot of time. And it's just amazing to see how the narrative is shifting. And even this week, right now, Bloomberg starting to talk about how Bitcoin has traded a little bit differently to the Nasdaq for just maybe a couple of days, but it's an interesting start.
Yeah, this decoupling is interesting. The D word is getting used more and more for the even traditional financial space. I mean, yesterday, for the people, we are now recording on 23rd of April, so this podcast will come out in May, so it's a little further down the line. But yesterday was the day where Bitcoin went up and the whole market basically went down, which is an amazing sign that the market slowly gets it. But I'm very skeptical, honestly, because there's like it's just a day or two. It's not a long trend, and it can also be just a coincidence. So,
no, absolutely. I mean, we've seen already a couple of times where people are celebrating the big decoupling of Bitcoin from other assets. And but I think the more and more we are seeing these kind of one-time events where people are starting to talk about decoupling, it's also starting to form a narrative around Bitcoin, right? So that more and more people are thinking about, wait a minute, why are people talking about decoupling? Why are they talking about Bitcoin being digital gold? Is it maybe something we have to look at? And anytime we are seeing these 1, 2, or 3-day events where Bitcoin kind of decouples from financial markets, I think is just embedding this narrative more and more into the mainstream or the financial mainstream.
So basically, when there's like a day or two where there is actually decoupling on that day, because mainstream news and mainstream media is reporting on that, there is a kind of narrative spinning around that it's actually decoupling, and this could further decouple Bitcoin from the rest of it because there's a narrative starting.
In a sense, yes. And I mean, it's also showing that it could trade differently than other assets. But of course, it takes a lot of time for people to see it that way. And I mean, I don't have to tell you, as a Bitcoiner, Bitcoin has all the characteristics to be like a decorrelated asset or like a safe haven asset, a hedge against uncertainty. But in the end, if we are being honest, many market participants still see it as a risk on asset, so as an asset that trades when there's like when stocks go up, Bitcoin also goes up. It just takes time to for investors, for market participants to understand what Bitcoin truly is, and that it's not just a short-term speculative flip where you can make a lot of profit in the short term.
How important do you think is that narrative shift in the mainstream media? Is this just a consequence of Bitcoin getting adopted, or is it actually making headways in the adoption for Bitcoin?
So I think it would have happened either way, like this shift in narratives. But of course, they are now reinforcing mechanisms. So if Bitcoin behaves a certain way, maybe even if it's not true yet, and mainstream media starts talking about it, then it's just reinforcing the idea that Bitcoin could be a safe asset or a decorrelated asset to traditional financial markets. And it's not one or the other, but it's just something that's reinforcing each other.
Yeah, and it helps a lot that people like Larry Fink, who are very respected in the traditional financial space, say, "Oh, it's a flight to flight to safety." I think he said, a flight to quality, something like that. That really helps to shift the narrative in the mainstream media, because there's always like what we Bitcoiners talk about and what the world actually thinks currently, because we maybe are. I'm curious actually on that question, because of there's always this question of how many people actually understand Bitcoin. We have the numbers of how many people have exposure to Bitcoin. They range from like 300 million to 600 million people, something like that. But how many of those actually do self-custody? How many run their own nodes? How many have actually understood Bitcoin and have more of like 100 hours in the bank of it? It's a hard thing to accomplish. And then it's like those people who have understand it and talk to each other have very different narratives than 99.9% of the world actually currently has. And we have to push that further somehow.
Yeah, I think it's still a very relatively low number, which are really like hardcore Bitcoiners or understand Bitcoin, what it is or what it might be. I mean, I'm not even sure I fully understand Bitcoin or anyone actually fully understands Bitcoin. I mean, there's so much to unpack regarding Bitcoin, and we don't really know yet all the potential it has down the line. So, but yeah, the ones that at least understood the fundamental proposition of Bitcoin, I think it's still also very relatively low number compared to all the holders we have that are holding Bitcoin. I mean, we have so many holders today that just have Bitcoin exposure via ETFs and other products. And they don't self-custody their Bitcoin. And I think that makes a huge difference already if you like a Bitcoiner who says, no, but I have to hold my own keys and have that, because that's what's it about, right? Bitcoin self-sovereignty and being free from political control, etc. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's so interesting that you say that, because I'm also very much the opinion that nobody really understands everything. It's just too deep of a topic that you can fully understand something, but there's like a degree of it, and maybe we have to cut off, like, if you understand 60% of it, you kind of grasp it, and you count as someone that understands it, or whatever the percentage is. What do you think is the biggest thing, or like the biggest area in Bitcoin where you still want to learn more about Bitcoin?
I mean, me personally, I come more from the, let's say, market side, or the side where you look at transformative potentials of Bitcoin, Bitcoin mining in Africa, etc. So I for sure lack a bit of more the technical understanding of Bitcoin, on the program level, coding level, etc. I think that's some areas I would like to catch up a bit more. But everyone has like their niche around Bitcoin, and then some areas they understand better and less well.
It's very important to be aware of where you still want to learn more. And yeah, the technical aspect, I think technically especially it's very hard to understand everything in great detail, especially if you go deeper on all the aspects. But really cool. One thing that was before, when you talked about the price, why we are not at $500,000 or $1 million or something like that, I ask myself that a lot, actually. For me, it's a blessing. It's like, I'm so grateful for that, because I would have a lot less exposure to Bitcoin if Bitcoin would have shot to like $1 million last year. But why do you think this is? Like, for me, it's so obvious to see all the developments that happening and all the questions that are kind of in Bitcoin kind of already solved. And if you look back 10 years, there were so many open questions that still do be interested to figure out, like the block size wars we had ETFs. Now we have so many things that we have seen. Can Bitcoin withstand that? Can Bitcoin actually reach those levels? We have seen so many of that already that it's kind of unbelievable that we are still at just 100K.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unbelievable, but also, I mean, I'm not going to say it's something about market manipulation or something, because I don't think so. I think it just comes down to mainly information asymmetry. As we spoke about, some people already see the value proposition, some don't. So we also have a lot of people ready to sell at 100K, and we've seen people sell at 100K. So it's just like, for me, it comes down to information asymmetry and people not grasping what Bitcoin is yet. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, of course, we've seen big demand by MicroStrategy, by ETFs, but I think it's not as significant yet that justifies to me that we had to scream like there's market manipulation going on or something. Of course, there's always manipulation going on in markets, irrespective of Bitcoin, but I don't think that's the reason why we are at the price where we are yet. It's, yeah.
Some people also confuse, in my opinion, buying and selling with market manipulation. This is like,
exactly.
People say, oh, but what if this big OG sells a lot of Bitcoin and manipulates the market? I'm like, that's not like, that's a free market. That's buy and sell, supply and demand. That's normal.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
I mean, buy and sell, supply and demand is just what is natural. And I mean, you could argue there's some, if it were true that exchanges don't hold the Bitcoin they actually have, then it's in a sense market manipulation or suppression. But I'm not sure that this is actually the case, or like, I don't think they can, to such an extent, inflate the supply on exchanges without having so many, like the Bitcoin actually backed, and that it has an effect on the price, where if without exchanges we would already be at triple the price or something. So yeah.
It's just a short-term thing, I think.
Exactly.
You can do it short-term, but I mean, we have seen examples like FTX. How many Bitcoin did they actually hold? Like 2 or something like that. It's like some ridiculously small amount of Bitcoin they actually held, versus how many they actually should have held. So it's just a question of time. If BlackRock or anyone actually does that, I mean, BlackRock, if they do it, they probably are a little bit smarter than FTX. But if someone does it, I think it's just a matter of time till the thing is crashing.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look right now at the institutions holding the Bitcoin, like Coinbase holds the majority of Bitcoin for Bitcoin spot ETFs, and they are all highly regulated. And I don't think they have anything to gain by pretending that there's Bitcoin that they actually don't have, because the risk of this coming out and blowing up is way too high for like Coinbase, or even, I mean, I don't see why BlackRock should pretend that they don't have the Bitcoin they have. I mean, that would be, on the one hand, it's still a relatively marginal business for those asset managers. So it's simply not worth the reputational risk to say, okay, let's pretend we have the Bitcoin while we don't actually have them. So I don't really see why they should do that. Yeah.
It's a good point. It's they don't have an incentive, and I'm a big believer in incentives. Like if someone has a huge incentive to manipulate the Bitcoin price, and at the same time, if he gets caught, doesn't blow up his own business, like Coinbase would blow up his own business if they come to know of like, oh, they just have like 100 Bitcoin or something like that, and they should have like 1 million or some whatever the amount is they are holding. That would basically ruin their whole business and would probably bankrupt then. I don't know, but probably. So why would they risk something we know an exchange on its own without doing the tricks is quite profitable? So why the heck would they do it?
And I mean, Coinbase is not itself that much in the accumulating Bitcoin business themselves. They are not holding too many Bitcoin. So why? I mean, it doesn't make sense for them to suppress price to be able to themselves accumulate cheaper, because we are not really seeing them buying that much Bitcoin. So yeah, I think around that area, we can't be for sure, but to me it makes more sense that they have the Bitcoin they are selling and not that they not paper Bitcoin in a sense.
But yeah, it's kind of unbelievable that we already are where we are with also strategic Bitcoin reserves. What do you think is next for Bitcoin? What is the next thing that you kind of foresee?
I mean, what we are talking about right now is Bitcoin reserves, obviously, of countries. I don't know who's going to be the next country doing that. I think that's something that's going to happen at some point. Not sure if the US is actually going to actively buy Bitcoin again. But yeah, I think around that topic, we'll see more and more happening. And for sure, we spoke about the Bitcoin treasury companies adopting Bitcoin. I think that's also, I mean, it's already a hot topic right now. It's being discussed in the Bitcoin circle. And I think that's one thing that's going to become more and more relevant over the coming years.
Yeah, it's the topic that Bitcoin will drain the monetary premium from all other assets slowly, and we're seeing just the beginning of that. I think right now.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't seen anything yet. It's just a few crazy Bitcoiners doing that as a treasury strategy, and maybe, of course, you have Tesla, etc. But it's just the beginning of people thinking about putting Bitcoin reserves on balance sheets, etc. Yeah.
How do you think this will go when monetary premium will continue to be absorbed by Bitcoin from real estate, from stocks, from treasuries, from basically everything that is qualifying as a store of value currently?
What do you mean, as in consequences, or
the consequence of that? If Bitcoin is more and more doing that, how will the global asset market basically change when Bitcoin is the primary or maybe even the default asset for everyone to use as a store of value?
I mean, it's a tough question to answer. It depends on the speed that is happening, because if it's happening relatively fast and let's say real estate is increasingly becoming unattractive as a store of value, we will see like severe consequences on these kind of markets with prices dropping. And of course, many people have maybe used their real estate as collateral, and if that goes down, it's not ideal if your collateral drops in value against what you've borrowed. But to be honest, it's hard to say how that's going to happen and the consequences.
I'm wondering if real estate actually ever drops in value when you compare it to US dollar, because for me it's like then it is crashing already and probably will crash against Bitcoin, but US dollars is probably crashing more than real estate. It's like the scarce asset versus the infinite asset, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. If you see if other assets are being demonetized, that also means that fiat currencies are in a sense being devalued, because I mean, once people start shifting from real estate, etc., to Bitcoin, why shouldn't they also start to shift from US dollars or euros or whatever currency you're talking about to Bitcoin itself? And of course, that will accelerate the depreciation of fiat currencies against Bitcoin as well, and also against possibly assets.
Yeah, the spending of Bitcoin is an interesting topic. Are you at all for you probably still use fiat for spending, or you're already starting to use Bitcoin here and there as medium of exchange?
I mean, I use it anytime I can, but it's still very limited, at least in the physical space if you go to stores. So yeah, I'm still, of course, using a lot of fiat for day-to-day life.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition, for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there. Yeah, I mean, there are things like credit. I mean, I've not seen it yet. I've not experienced that. In Europe, but I heard a lot of people talk about that, especially in America, where they have a credit card which is basically deducting from Bitcoin with some mechanism. Or you have a credit card that you pay off once a month with your Bitcoin with something does these things. But that's not really a Bitcoin as medium of exchange. It's selling Bitcoin at market price when you buy it and directly converted it to fiat. That's not a real medium of exchange.
No, I'm more a bigger fan of these circular economies where you can spend your Bitcoin and it actually stays there. So like the shop owner is not immediately converting it to local fiat currency. So it's where, as you say, it's more of an actual medium of exchange, because if you use the credit cards, of course, you personally live on a Bitcoin standard. But on the other side, where you're paying, this person doesn't have any touch point at all with Bitcoin, and they don't even see right that you're paying with Bitcoin, because they just receive whatever fiat currency immediately to their account. And I think it makes a lot of sense if you personally want to live on a Bitcoin standard, but I I think the way to go long run is wherever you can spend Bitcoin with a Bitcoin business, you just use your money and like your Bitcoin and spend on, because then it ends up in the hands of another Bitcoiner. It's not being converted back to fiat, and you're kind of creating another economy on the side. And I think that's the one where things get interesting. So like the circular economy projects in Africa, in Latin America, etc. That's the things which I think are more exciting in terms of Bitcoin as means of exchange. Yeah.
How important do you think those circular economies and Bitcoin as a medium of exchange is for Bitcoin also as a store of value? Like how necessary is that for it being adopted also as a store of value?
I think right now it's maybe not as important yet, but it's pretty amazing and very important that people are working on these kind of circular economies. Basically just also to showcase the world, okay, hey, you can also live on a Bitcoin standard and it actually works. Then it's not something that is in the distant future, maybe 50 years ahead. So you can actually live on a Bitcoin standard. You can use Bitcoin, you can pay with it. And so it's maybe not as important yet, but I think it's extremely important work that people are doing right now that are trying to establish circular economies. Yeah.
I had Jeff Booth on a couple of episodes ago, or like a couple of weeks ago, and he said something that I'm battling since ever since then, and I also heard it discussed a lot online. He said if Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange, it will also fail as a store of value. And the more I think about it, the more I disagree with that.
Okay. Yeah.
But because like you can make an argument that gold has kind of failed as a medium of exchange, but it's still a great store of value. I mean, you can define now how great it actually is, but it's the biggest asset on the planet. Obviously, it could be way better because most people don't use gold as a medium of exchange. Most people as a store of value. Most people use like real estate or stocks or something like that. So in a way, it also hasn't fulfilled the full potential it has as a store of value. How do you look at that statement from him?
Yeah, I've seen that statement on Twitter, I think. I tend to agree a bit with him, but I'm on the same page as you. I need to think more about it. As you said, gold has been fine without being actually a medium of exchange over the last, I don't know, at least decades. It was not even like before that. You can argue, okay, the US dollar has been backed by gold and fiat currencies have been backed by gold. Yeah, so I think in the short run to medium run, it does not matter, but the more ideally we would see more and more it being used as a medium of exchange, at least in some countries where currencies are highly volatile as well. Because I mean, right now, here in Europe, of course, the euro is not the best currency, though, right? It's going down in value over time. We have inflation, but at least it does not fluctuate that much. So I can at least be a bit more certain about what I can buy tomorrow as well with my euro compared to today. Not in the medium run. Of course, I know I will lose value by holding euros. But yeah, I think we're seeing first Bitcoin become adopted more and more as a store of value, which also means that we see volatility drop. And then I think it makes also more sense for many people to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange when it becomes less volatile, particularly in countries that are already experiencing highly volatile currencies that can be devalued overnight, that see high inflation, and then even Bitcoin. I mean, even now, Bitcoin in some countries like Zimbabwe might be a better choice than the local currency simply because the local currency is so bad and fluctuating or losing value so fast that even the strong volatility of Bitcoin is better than just holding a local currency.
Yeah, there's another topic where I'm amazed how Argentina and countries like that don't get to the best money of Bitcoin. They rather go to the US dollar, which is a better fiat currency than their own. So, and I'm seeing it all over the place where people are kind of making the small baby step to a better fiat currency. I mean, obviously, if you have a currency that is inflated with like 150%, the US dollar seems like an amazing store of value against that. But it's still really highly inflated away against Bitcoin. So it's kind of interesting.
But I mean, I'm not blaming them because I'm not like 100%. I'm heavily into Bitcoin, but I still have some euros on my bank account that I use for my day-to-day use. And I mean, who am I then to tell people they should live 100% on Bitcoin in developing countries when it's highly volatile? And I mean, that's also why we're seeing a lot of stablecoin adoption, even if you have all the counterparty risk that thinking about, is the stablecoin actually backed by US dollars or backed by US treasuries, etc. But I mean, for them, it's a way better solution than using the local currency for day-to-day trading or day-to-day activity. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for medium of exchange, it makes a lot more sense, especially like short term. You don't want to have a situation where you have a big expense right when Bitcoin dropped a lot, but at the same time, the more I think about it, the more it's like that's all kind of market timing. That's why I'm right now in a transitioning phase of how to set up my life 100% on Bitcoin, even though maybe I have to sell and things like that. But I want to get more and more away from using my bank account, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
I've seen, and I'm really curious on what's your take on it, because I've now, with my podcasting business, I have a fiat income stream and a Bitcoin income stream. The Bitcoin income stream is actually a lot bigger than the fiat income stream. And I have a fiat expense stream and a fiat Bitcoin expense stream. And what I've noticed, ever since I earn and spend in Bitcoin, like directly, never even touching any fiat rails, and also the sender is in Bitcoin and the receiver is in Bitcoin and keeps the Bitcoin also. I have cared about the Bitcoin price on a day-to-day, maybe 10%, and now it completely dropped to like maybe 1%. And because I don't buy Bitcoin anymore on exchange. I've not touched an exchange for, I think, 4 to 5, maybe 6 months. I don't know, because my fiat and Bitcoin stream is so nicely split that I can pay the fiat expenses and the Bitcoin expenses, which is an amazing thing. But I probably have to exchange in the future more. This will not always stay like that. But that's why I'm more and more into the idea that I just have my Bitcoin wallet and I have a fiat bank account for emergencies where I'm like, okay, let's have 5,000 euros there. It's just like, if I really have an emergency, and like, okay, then let's spend that. And I have my Bitcoin to fiat rails. Like there's Bull Bitcoin that offers something. There's like a lot of different service providers that offer you can pay someone directly, do an IBAN with Bitcoin and all those things, and the credit cards backed on Bitcoin. And me personally, just on a Bitcoin standard, I'm not there yet, and I'm not sure if it's the best way, but I think that's, for me, the most peace of mind status that I could be.
Absolutely agree. I mean, that's what I've been seeing when I spoke to people living kind of on a Bitcoin standard in circular economies, and for them it's just like, okay, I have my Bitcoin stack on my wallet. It does, I mean, they are not as affected anymore by these day-to-day fluctuations, because simply they look at, okay, how many sats do I spend on a coffee? So yeah, you shift a bit your perspective on fluctuations, etc. And of course, I spoke to some of them, and they said, yeah, if you're long enough in Bitcoin, in any case, you will be spending your Bitcoin at a profit in a sense. So even if it fluctuates day to day or even month to month, you will still be like spending your Bitcoin at a value that is higher as if you would have held like in euros for like the last 4 or 5 years. So yeah, it's just a shift of perspective in a sense.
Yeah, it's also the emotional detachment from the Bitcoin price. And I see it all the time on Twitter, especially now that we have a run up. Welcome back, 88K. Yeah. Welcome back, 89K. I'm like, well, like, who cares? Yeah. I mean, I would care if Bitcoin jumps today from, let's say, 95K to 150K. That's a jump along. Oh, like shit, what happened there? I'm probably making a small emergency solo episode on the podcast. But everything, like Bitcoin has to move in a day more than 15% that I get even a little bit excited, up and down.
Yeah. Also, like, of course, we're seeing Bitcoin move up right now, but doesn't mean it can't move down again to 80K. So it's like Bitcoin Twitter is celebrating it as if we are now running towards much, much higher prices. But it's just a very tiny, insignificant move in a sense. So.
But is that important? Do you think that there's some value in that small celebrations?
I mean, it's valuable in creating hype and narratives, of course. Yeah. So, and I mean, I get it. It's great to see when what you have in Bitcoin theoretically could buy you more now. For me, the Bitcoin price itself is more. Of course, it's nice as well for me to see what I have in Bitcoin is becoming more valuable in fiat currency. But it's more of, for me, it's also like a sign of if we're trending up long term, that Bitcoin is being adopted more and more, that Bitcoin is becoming more and more entrenched in the system, like the Trojan horse, basically. And I mean, that's why I'm mostly excited about price going up, because it means adoption going up, and the potential to change the systems we have right now is, simply going up.
Really, really cool. One thing that I want to also touch on with you is mining, as you're now working in mining. I think you also worked before. Maybe I got this completely wrong, but I connected you with TerraHash before somehow. Maybe
yes,
I'm wrong.
Yeah, I've been like a TerraHash representative for a bit of time. Yeah, so I've not been working directly with them, but mainly as a representative to help them out on stuff, etc. Yeah.
How do you look at Bitcoin mining right now, and what is kind of like exciting you on that space?
I mean, it's a very challenging business right now, but I'm extremely excited about all these topics surrounding, on the one hand, Bitcoin mining and microgrids. So what is Gridless is doing, because I'm coming more from the development economics perspective. So I've looked a lot on economics surrounding Africa, Latin America, etc. So it's pretty exciting to see what they're doing there, making microgrids economically viable by essentially taking up any surplus energy and anything that is helping with like fostering economic growth in those areas that is not dependent on development aid, development financing. I think that's amazing. So I hope we are going to see more and more of that in, be it Africa, Latin America, or any other country where people are planning to set up microgrids to bring electrification. And what more and more is happening now is also grid balancing of Bitcoin mining. Even in Europe, we see more and more players coming up right now using Bitcoin mining to balance the grid. I mean, we see more and more rising shares of renewable energies in our electricity grids, right, in Europe. And that means also we see more and more fluctuations in the energy supply. And I think Bitcoin mining is one of the key players that could arise in grid balancing and make just an amazing market-based solution where right now governments might pay hundreds of millions in euros per year to renewable energy providers to curtail, to shut down their energy production if there's too much energy in the grid. And instead of that, why not use Bitcoin miners to balance the load that is fluctuating due to rising renewable energy shares? So that's one area I'm pretty excited about right now in Bitcoin mining.
It's kind of amazing to me, and I learned this only with Bitcoin mining, that there is too much energy sometimes, and people pay to get rid of it. It's a weird concept for me, where there's excess energy and they might even pay for that. Why are they not getting paid for it when they just plug into a Bitcoin miner? I mean, this
exactly.
Seems pretty obvious.
Because right now people or governments pay for it either to maybe, for example, shut down wind power temporarily if there's too much energy in the net, because otherwise you will risk like the whole energy grid that it breaks down. Or if you export it to other countries, you're basically paying the consumers or the other countries to take up your excess energy. And yeah, it's not a great solution, I would say, to pay others. Hey, I produce too much energy. I don't know what to do it. I pay you 1 or 2 cents per kilowatt hour so that you take my energy because I don't know where to put it. And it just makes sense to use that energy to generate Bitcoin, or also to simply just, you don't even, that's the amazing thing about all those grid balancing operations. You don't even necessarily need to make a lot of profit on Bitcoin mining, but simply because you can provide a service to the grid provider that is to stabilize the grid. Like you're already getting paid for that service, that you're basically a backup to the grid, which can power up and down depending on the needs of the electricity grid. So that's just simply amazing. An amazing use case for Bitcoin. Yeah.
You're getting paid for being ready to take up electricity, and then you can actually take it up and also make money with that electricity. It's kind of amazing.
And usually you take up the energy when it's cheap, because then there's a lot of energy, excess energy. So you likely not going to pay the market rate, but a lower rate to take up the energy. Yeah.
Really, really interesting. I love that. One thing with people that are working in Bitcoin, I'm always wondering how Bitcoin has impacted your life.
The obvious, of course, my day-to-day life is Bitcoin, reading about Bitcoin or understanding the transformative potentials of Bitcoin mining. But yeah, the personal impact, good question. Maybe I'm a bit more conscious about consumption, but I don't want to say it has totally turned my way of life upside down. In a sense, like other Bitcoiners, I say they completely live now a frugal life where they don't spend anymore and stuff like that. So it's more that it leads me to think more about topics, and also it makes me a bit more hopeful about the future of the world, because if you follow the news, etc., you might think the world is ending in 5 years and everything is bad. And so in a sense, it makes me also a bit more positive for the future, being a Bitcoiner.
100%. I love that. I asked each and every one of my guests one question, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Give me a second, I need to think about it. Besides Bitcoin, I'm very much about nature conservation, natural, around nature conservation. I'm very focused on that. For example, like after my PhD, I took some time off, spent like 3 months in South Africa in the bush and learned to be a safari guide, basically. So learned a lot about nature and how everything interconnects and why it's important to conserve nature in Africa, but anywhere else as well. And yeah.
I love that. That's a great one. Really, really cool. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, which industry do you think will be most affected by Bitcoin in the next 10 years besides finances, and why?
I think it's going to be the energy industry. We already spoke about that. There's so many use cases around Bitcoin mining. I don't know who said that, but someone in the Bitcoin space basically said any energy company that doesn't mine Bitcoin or isn't somehow into Bitcoin mining in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be left behind. So yeah, it's I think that's going to be the next big thing around grid balancing, but also gas flaring and all these topics where simply Bitcoin mining makes sense to be there to take up anything that is wasted otherwise.
100%. The energy was kind of obvious for me, the energy industry as an answer. But yeah, it's really interesting how energy will be, or how the energy producers will discover Bitcoin. It slowly happens, but they are still, yeah, as with all of Bitcoin, all of the world with Bitcoin, they're still early to the game. Really cool. Thank you so much, Jan, for being on the show. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter. I'm very active there. Also on LinkedIn, and I've started writing a newsletter on Bitcoin research. So you can find also my newsletter on Substack, which is called Bits of Bitcoin Research.
Really cool. Thank you so much for being on and for taking the time. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.